to Defying Gentrification. This is Kristen Jeffers, your lovely host, and we're at episode 6. And today I'm going to have a solo show. I have a hot topic, and I am going to talk about what I personally need to defy gentrification. If you've listened to episodes 2 and 3, I talked about what society needs, and yeah, I interspersed some of what I need into that, but specifically as a Black queer feminist who is chronically ill, there's a few extra things that I need, there's a few special things that I need, and things that other folks might not need, and I want us today to think about what that is. So yeah, we're going to do that today, and I'm going to talk about a hot topic that's been brewing and that's been hot for me for 11 years, and that is the issue of teen curfews. So with that, we're going to take a break. I'm going to record my ad, and then we'll be back with our hot topic of teen curfews. So I have a bookshop.org store, and that is a wonderful way to support me and support the podcast. You can find it at bookshop.org/shop/Kristen E. Jeffers. I'm going to recommend a couple books later on in the next couple ad breaks, but right now, I'd love for you to just go and explore it. In fact, you can do it while you're listening to me. That's bookshop.org/shop/KRISTENJEFFERS. And now, let's get back to the show. And we're back. And teen curfews is this week's hot topic. When just those two words together, teen and curfew, make my blood boil. And if you have been following me throughout my various projects and my collective work over the years of being a public urbanist on the internet in the world, I can take you all the way back to 2013 when this first really truly became an issue for me. But the reality is this has made my blood boil since around 1999, 1998, when my hometown mall, Four Seasons Town Center, decided that they wanted to enact a teen curfew. Now, the demographics of the time at Greensboro were Four Seasons Mall or Town Center. Most of us say Four Seasons Mall, so you'll hear me interchangeably say the two. They still had a Belk. They still had the Dillards was not where Belk was. The Dillards was in its own place. That building was not what it is now. And then JCPenney's been where it's always been. They had just remodeled the mall for the second time. They had taken away the underground bookstore, and they had added the fountain court. And so many of us were allowed to go to that mall in clusters and groups supervised to go sing for choral events. And of course, I'll have to be real, like as a feminine person who was kind of making terms with who I liked and who I didn't like, and even how I felt in this body that was starting to develop, the mall felt a little uncomfortable, but I still never liked the fact that the mall gave us rules about what we could and couldn't do. So here we are. Let's fast forward to 2013. Two adult men are at a nightclub in downtown Greensboro. Because we live in a world with guns, those two men pull out guns, and one of them is shot. It's been a while ago. I don't think anybody was shot dead, but someone was shot. It did sort of disrupt things. And what did our town decide to do? Now, I will give our mayor at the time, who is our current mayor, credit for saying that if she could have found a way in the law to ban all adult activity at 11 p.m., that's what she would have done. But however, what ended up happening was, I'm sure some business owners said, hey, you can't punish our adult population. We need that population to make money. So what we're going to do, what we would like for you to do is just ban the teenage clients, ban the teenagers. They fight anyway. They're annoying. They don't have money. And we're such a good little Christian town. Why aren't they doing good little Christian things anyway? So that was also repulsible because, yes, we ended up having a whole teen curfew. Now, at the time, I was 20. This was in 2013, and I'm 38 now, so I was about 27, 28. And if you've seen me, yes, on a good day, I can look a good 5 to 10 years younger than I really am. And I definitely did then. I was thinner. And, I most of the time I alternated between wearing my hair in my curls and fro and pressing it. And I was very concerned. I did not like the idea. And at the time, I was living at the City View Apartments, we are downtown, but we're kind of back off of our main drag, which is called Elm Street. We don't have Main Street, we have Elm Street in Greensboro. And so that's when I spoke up. And that, of course, led to couple of my blog posts, talking to City Lab, Sarah Goodyear, who of course is one of the co-hosts now of The War on Cars, in one of her previous capacities. I also I was on HuffPost Live with her and another black gentleman who had from a university in New Jersey, who had a very academic view over at the criminality of this and the failures of this. But one of the things that happened, and one of the things that was going on in the background of this second incident with hearing about teen curfews, was that my dad had just passed away. And usually when I'm angry about something and when I'm ranting about something, much like I'm talking to you here on the mic, my dad was my person that I used to talk to. And sometimes when I record these, I do think about if he was still here today, how would I talk to him about this? So that would kind of cool me off a little bit. But this time, between living downtown myself, between looking younger and not having dad, teen curfews, and having potential ID checks, and thinking about kids and there was this really loophole that you could be working downtown and not be a problem. So basically, in my mind, we're saying that it's okay for kids to work for us, but otherwise them being at leisure is unsafe. And then the other thing that happened in 2013, I forgot, we've actually had curfews twice. We had the adult shooting, and then that kind of primed us for the children. It was probably, I think it was really only about 10 people directly involved in the altercation. And there were about 300 to 400 kids who were just downtown. If you've been to a playground fight before, if you've been to a playground fight in a park, which in this case it was in the City Park, kids do surround each other. Some of them egg each other on. And yeah, it's probably because of something petty, but it just happened in public. It did not happen in somebody's backyard. It did not happen in the schoolyard. It happens in a public park. So let's put that context all here together, because now we're looking at, and now I'm getting into the article that I'm citing this week in this week's Hot Topic. I'm citing the article from NBC Washington, and actually it's a series of articles now, because they've really been following this story like back to back to back, of a recent incident at Prince George's County, or PG County. And once again, I'll use those interchangeably, Prince George's and PG County's National Harbor, which is effectively downtown Oxon Hill, which is where Les lived for 12 years, and I lived with her for a good 5 years before we came to live here in the Wharf, DC. And that area is very interesting in that it's kind of quasi-private. And that's what makes it even more of an interesting case than what was going on with us in Greensboro. Downtown Greensboro is still the public realm. Yes, Center City Park is under a public-private partnership. So, of course, the private means of let's remove people from the public realm, which, of course, all of our students right now, hundreds of campuses, having this moment of taking over areas that, even though that is their home, that is their space, but because they don't own it, and the people that own the space don't like what they're saying and don't like what they're standing for. And for the record, yes, I'm here for not just Palestine, but I'm here for every country that has been ostracized, including the one that I'm sitting in right now and recording in right now. So let me make that clear. So back to our young folks at National Harbor in PG County. One other piece of context is it is prom season, it is graduation season, and remember, these kids now, and I'll even say kids because it's a lot of these teenagers. If I had had a child as a teenager, yeah, they would be my kids. So I definitely feel like I'm in auntie mode right now, and I want you all to keep that in mind, that I'm speaking from millennial auntie mode, and a millennial auntie who's had to unpack a lot of her own prejudices around public space, what's appropriate for kids to do. Now, yes, even at age 27, I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I was only 10 years removed from this situation. But now being 20 years removed from being a teenager, I'm still just as passionate that if we're going to punish people, and of course, there's an abolition argument here, but if we're going to punish people, we need to punish everybody. And I feel like the proper punishment, instead of enacting a juvenile curfew, emergency juvenile curfew, and yes, that's what it's called. They refer to them as juveniles, even though most of the children are not criminals yet. Just being on the street in a visibly black appearance, just being on the street and you've got your darker skin, you're fat, you have locks, you're louder, and you're louder in the black way, or the quote, I'll put quotes around the black way because there are times when people have been hearing me and I laugh very loudly and I have a southern accent, so I get wrapped into this a lot of times too, even though I have supposed privileges, and yes, I'm on the so quote unquote better side of colorism, which anyway, I feel like we should have punished us adults should have taken the issue. And then when you read in the article that I'm linked to, and one of the things that was brought up by the I believe, District 8 Councilman Ed Burrows, who, full disclosure, we do know and we have talked to before, and they are aware, maybe even listening. They brought up that in the case of this situation where the environment was set for kids to be walking around and then some kids fought and then it, caught on video and multiple, it was, once again, if you've ever been to a playground fight, sometimes the playground fight is contagious. We love watching TV shows where violence happens like this. We love being spectators of this. But the minute it happens in real life, and then we want to ask our kids, well, where did you get that from? Where did you learn that? I'm like, I wonder where too, We adults are just as big as spectators. We adults are just, we are often intoxicated just as bad. But it's easy to plant the blame on our kids. And then, of course, the other favorite is, oh, where are the parents? So let me run it back. So let's remember that not every child out here is with their the parents who birthed them. Many families now at this point have step parents involved. Many of us were raised in village with aunts and uncles both, directly related, like within the bloodline with the same parents or the same grandparents, or, grandparents that are adjacent, or just folks like me that are, in this case, a community auntie or uncle or uncle. The non-binary version of that relationship is a weird word to me. Like a lot of the non-binary words for, I'll accept nibbling, but I don't really like the adult version of that word. So you'll hear me, and I usually kind of lean fem to that. But that's an aside. But still, as someone in this position, I think we should have shut down every single bar and every single hotel bar in National Harbor. I think if they can track the rooms that these kids came from, and even if they can't, because if it's such a public issue, then why isn't National Harbor closed down? Why isn't MGM closed down? Of course, the first thing people are going to say, now I know some people are going to be like, yeah, Kristen, that's right. We should close it all down because it's just a heathen den anyway. We didn't want the casino. We didn't want all these bars. After all, this is PG County. This is the capital of black mega churches, black conservative mega churches. I've mentioned a few of them on this show before. But I think what we need to do and be mindful of is that in this particular case, here we are dealing with this again. These kids have already been under heavy restriction. Some of the caretakers of these kids thought it would be a good idea to let them hang loose. Now, as a fellow auntie, I think you need to make that choice for yourself, whether or not you want to consume certain substances. Certain substances do hurt your body. And I'm just saying this as somebody who, when I drink alcohol these days, even as an adult well of age, I don't wake up the same way I used to. I don't even think I was doing hangovers well back then. So that is a factor. As someone who now has like kind of autoimmune issues stemming from, I have allergies, I have a degree of long COVID, like those, and I've had other surgeries, like having had health issues. That's what's keeping me away. And I'm so glad we also have sober culture. So now we have mocktails and things of that nature. So we are starting to decriminalize a lot of substances. Like cannabis should have never been there. Like it gets wrapped up in this morality that's very easy, and it's a very slippery slope. And I've ended up recording, this is the second time I've actually recorded this segment, because I wanted to make sure that I made it clear that if we're going to punish people in this way, punish everybody. If we're not going to offer things for teenagers to do, like really it would be fun. Like there's the bubble tea shop, there's the Ben and Jerry's, there's the docks themselves, there's a whole trail. Nobody seems to be worried that white kids might be walking over from Alexandria. And we need to ask ourselves why we're not worried about that. We need to ask ourselves why we're not worried about why. And it kind of gets back. And I'm going to put this in the show notes as well. There was an incident where a young child was electrocuted at the casino because her parent was inside the casino, and her other parent had brought her to see said parent, because said parent was just spending all their time in the casino. And let's think about, what are we as adults spending all of our time doing where we aren't paying attention to our kids, and we aren't teaching good conflict resolution, and we're not modeling it ourselves. So all I want to say is, in an abolitionist framework, we have better conflict resolution for our children. And we don't say that the children that are working are even better. And by the way, our children, like the summer youth program that we have here, we need to go ahead and up that minimum wage. I've included in the show notes what the parameters of that are. So it's not so easy to just get a job. The young folks that we've had the thefts and the carjackings and the phone thefts, they're not getting paid enough to survive. They're getting paid more to take objects. So, and then of course, we're acting like that there's no pandemic. We're acting like that we're not bombing countries and everything. So what I want to say in this week's Hot Topic, and kind of keep it shorter than the original version that I had, is that we have to take, all of us, those of us who are adults, need to really sit hard and think about what kind of possibility and role models we are. Then when we decide to meet correction and quote-unquote punishment, as it were, we need to think about that in an abolitionist framework. And we need to think about that, and we need to think about root causes, and we need to think about, are we motivated by greed? Are we motivated by public safety? Because to me, if public safety was the real concern, considering that National Harbor is almost like a play town, as it were, there's no real grocery store in there. There is a CVS, but it closes early. If it weren't for those hotels, it really wouldn't even be anybody there. And then of course you have the boat marinas, and you have a few people that reside in National Harbor. But I'll tell you, most of those folks drive to Alexandria, or they drive down Oxon Hill Road and they go to that Target and all those things there. This was my neighborhood. I saw it for my own selves. And then other than the trail, and even the trail you can kind of access. Now, this will be another episode where I talk about trail accessibility. That's not the hot topic of the day, but to me, there's not anything really down there. It really is an adult playground. And so maybe we don't get to have our adult playground for a week. If you say that is not fair, think about what we put on our kids. And there are other options besides just allowing them to like drink themselves silly. That part I am worried about, because there's a reason why we don't do alcohol. Like some countries don't even start alcohol before age 16. And many times, like a lot of, if you have stuff to do, fun stuff to do, you're not thinking about like drinking a beverage. Like you might drink a soda, but even then, who introduces us to that? Cannabis is more of a medicinal thing. Like who introduces us to that? What's going on? A lot of our kids are depressed. A lot of our kids haven't had an opportunity to see. Some of them aren't doing their sports anymore. Some of them have lost, are grieving. So I understand the need to let loose, but I think we should have handled this situation differently. And once again, I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, and I don't want to sound like one of those aunties, but I think we should have punished all of ourselves instead of just punishing the kids, especially since we are the adults in the room. As I said in my most recent live stream, I think we need to be more of the adults in the room, and we need to keep that in mind when we're thinking about policies that are affecting our kids, especially our so-called at-risk youth, and even ones that have support systems, but this time period of pandemic and heightened racial and transphobic and homophobic activities going around. So with that, I'm going to pause again. I'm going to take another ad break, and then I'm going to get back, and I'm going to talk about the things that I personally need to survive the things that I personally need to defy gentrification. And a lot of those things I've developed by being and living in this environment of dealing with being a teenager and not having things to do and having things to do that are paid and having restrictions. So keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about how I feel about that in the adult world. And yeah, come back after the ad. This is Defying Gentrification with Kristen Jeffers. So my first book of the week from my bookshop.org store is We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rodgers. I first found out about Rachel Rodgers by buying her small business bodyguard digital product to help me DIY my first terms and contracts way back when I got started with the Black Urbanist, and I was about 2 or 3 years in, and I realized I need to have a little bit more legal protection. Of course, I have followed her journey, and now she's been a key component of the work that I'm doing, including actually this podcast. So that you can go over to my bookshop.org store, find this book. It's bookshop.org/Kristen Jeffers. And now let's get back to the show. And welcome back to Defying Gentrification with Kristen Jeffers. I'm glad you came back. Now we're going to have a little bit more fun, and we're going to talk about, and now that we're back, I want to encourage us to start thinking the way that I'm thinking in this segment about what I'm thinking about what I realistically need to do well in a city, to defy gentrification, to thrive. And I've even noticed, this isn't the first time I've had this conversation in the public forum. Over the last 5 years, I've really been zeroing in on this conversation. I've been writing around this conversation, and I really wanted to just take this half of the episode today to really talk about what I need in a city and why I really, really, really need for gentrification to end. I wanted to make it personal. I wanted to make it, stand out. Not that I didn't do that in the other episodes, and not that I won't do it over and over again with all of my other guests that are coming up on the show. But I wanted to just take that time and talk about who I was as a person and how I came upon my thought process. So the best place to start is we've been back in time before, but I'm going to take us back to 1985 in Greensboro, North Carolina, when my parents had me. They brought me home to a post-World War II neighborhood that was starting to make its change from white to black, and folks that were from other places. North Carolina has been a destination state for many years, both for people who are moving from northern states at the time, even way back. Actually, North Carolina has always kind of been a destination state almost no sooner than slavery ended. As soon as enslavement ended, yes, we absolutely had segregation, but we also absolutely had a ripe workforce for textile mills. So we had at least 2 people move their textile mills from northern river towns and move them down to the state of North Carolina. So textiles has been part of bread and butter of who we are, and it's been part of the family. And that's why, if those of you who are wondering why I love craft and textiles so much, it's really what made my city be a city. So, I would hear about that. And when we lost textile mills in the late 90s, that was a big blow on who we were as people. And we started to have these conversations about what do we need. You know, there were other elders of our community, former mayors, business leaders of other industries that really wanted to have they wanted us to have a car lot. They wanted us, and now that, well, they settled on that. Like, and speaking of which, they wanted us to have like a car dealership, like more like car lots, like the more things going on at the airport, or just some kind of business that would support what we were doing as people, that would pay as much as we had been getting paid. I grew up in a Greensboro where most people grew up in subdivision like places. Like, everybody kind of grew up in a house, and there was a dichotomy between the kids who grew up in apartments and the kids who grew up in houses. And then when my parents split and we lived in an apartment, that did kind of shake that up for me a little bit. I did feel a little bit out of place because I had this, I spent the first 8 years of my life being a kid where the kids would come to my backyard, and we didn't have a white picket fence. We had a gray chain link fence. But there was a lot of that kind of boomer fantasy. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. She cooked every day. We went to the grocery store, Harris Teeter and Food Lion, and sometimes the Fresh Market, and we would go to the malls, and I had this really idyllic childhood. My dad taught me how to ride a bike and then a trike, and we used to ride around the neighborhood. Anybody who's seen me speak pre-2019, I've talked about this ad nauseum, about this. I had what felt like this perfect American childhood. And that made me think, okay, well, if I had this perfect American childhood and I'm a black child, maybe, other people don't need some of the resources they need. But I kind of knew something was up already, because I noticed that the people that lived down the street and what was then the Smith Homes Housing Project, unfortunately that's now gone, and I've talked about that before. I think that was more of a hot topic in one of my newsletters. Anyway, that made me kind of sad, because so many of those seniors in the senior part, they had little front porches on their little apartments. It was kind of like the little duplex housing, and they would sit out and they would look out for me riding my bike. And there was a health department division, and I walked up the hill, like my mom walked me up the hill at age 3, get one of my shots. I remember my legs burning. I remember I could have walked to my first elementary school, and honestly I could have walked to the second, even though the second one's more of like a 15-minute walk. The first one's more of a 5-minute walk. And that was it was so idyllic. We have, Greensboro is a college town, North Carolina A&T, UNC Greensboro, Guilford College, Greensboro College. Of course, now High Point University has become more of a factor in adjacent High Point. Of course, the furniture industry is a big part. So there's so many things that have been swimming in my head about like what a city meant. And then, of course, I know the Sesame Street generation. And especially in these later years, just thinking about that, my parents bought their house, like they were renting it, but then the guy comes up one day and says, hey, I'll sell this house to you, and they purchased it. They were members of, as employees of Guilford County Schools, they were employees of the State Employees Credit Union. That was all they needed to do. So, and then we had all these downtown festivals. We had, the downtown Greensboro was very much still intact. I mean, was kind of underutilized at the time. We were definitely in that era where we felt like we didn't need downtown, but we still had a good chunk of it intact. This is before the downtown stadium. This is before apartments became luxury. So the apartment I moved into in 2013 that I mentioned earlier in the podcast didn't exist yet, but it came back into an existence. And then we moved our train station back downtown, and now we have our performing arts center our main performing arts center downtown. We still have the Coliseum complex, but there's a bus link to it. There's a circulator now. We do have a bus system. We have a lot of things that connote city. But one other thing is, I grew up in a slightly conservative environment. I did not feel safe enough to be out as a queer person, and of course I repressed that. I also really didn't drive well. As well as I biked, I did not drive well. It's taken me years to master driving. And the irony of today is, just so I could have like a quiet space, I'm actually recording in my car. So as you can see, I've always been into like repurposing my vehicle. If I've had a vehicle, repurposing that for better use than driving at times. But I get to take this car out and go visit so many wonderful like farms and so much of my yarn community. And I've made that community. And so it's been very frustrating, especially in these last period since COVID, with watching housing go up. Like it's really even more so than living through the 2008 and 2009 recession, when of course I was on NC State's campus. I did everything but pledge. I was very well liked, or at least my professors and staff members liked me, and I had a few other friends on campus, but I was very self-assured. I was very cocky about it. Let me be real. I was very cocky about my positionality on campus, and I was one of those people that had 10 little notes in my resume. Like, oh, it wasn't even a resume. It was my email signature. We were literally the kids of the email signature resume. And then I get back out into the non-campus world, where the buses aren't free anymore. It's not easy for me to get a campus job. I don't have a faculty member that's also a family member. I don't have that like bubble that I was in. And I get back out there and I'm like, oh, well, the computers aren't as fast as they were on campus. Oh, I have to start from the beginning. And that's really been instrumental. And even right now, as I'm at a crossroads with career, and as we're looking at, okay, what are we going to possibly do next? Of course, we're having fun where we're living right now, but what's going to happen? So to me, as I've said in the other episode, and I know I mentioned some of this in the first episodes, I really have to have gentrification gone. And even before gentrification is gone, a lot of the things that I love, I need for gentrification to end so they can come back. Let me give you a few examples of what those things are. Number one is that when it's time to go get my hair done, actually my hairstylist is moving to Philly. So those of you who've seen me in person over the past couple of years, I've been on a purple and blue tour of my hair. I don't know how long that's going to last. I've got to make new plans for that, because it is an expensive process, but adding a train ticket to that is going to be more expensive. And she doesn't expect me to do that, but at least she is on public transit. At least it's like I could go to Union Station here, or I could get on the Metro, get off at Union Station, get on the Amtrak, get off at 30th Street Station, get on the SEPTA bus, and then I'm right in front of her salon. So that is an option for me. It's not the end of the world that I can't do that. So, but I just think about how if everybody was trained on black hair, I could just go down the street here where we live. There's like 3 hair salons in this complex. None of them seem to be geared towards, especially not geared towards my level of curliness. Like, they look at it, they see if they're bound by the hair typing chart, they're running away from me because I'm squarely in type 4. At least people think I'm in type 4. So there's that. There's food. Yes, we have a fish market down here, and that was exciting, but it's slightly different. And even for DMV, like Baltimore, Maryland, DC, Virginia, coastal Chesapeake Bay region, Virginia standards, some of our seafood could be a lot better. And as someone who grew up on Calabash seafood, gosh, it would be nice to have like a little Calabash joint here. I mean, literally, the people that built this neighborhood also have rebuilt Seaboard Station in Raleigh. Like, maybe y'all could bring Mayflower here, and maybe Mayflower could replace some of the fish market. No shade. Keep the Smith Island cake. I do like those little cakes, but there's something about just that Calabash seafood, and that's a me thing. I'm the one here that's trying to, like, I'm not trying to shave my head. That's not me. I like having hair, and I like having my big floofy poof. I like having my Calabash seafood. And then, there are places of worship, and like not just like Christian places of worship, but Buddhist Sanghas, and even here we have, I know of queer Muslims that have found like belonging here, and just being able to like tap into my spiritual pathways, process the kind of spirituality that I grew up in, process the griefs that I have and everything, having those spaces available to me, and then I can just walk to them. That's one of those things I need. Nature, gosh, I spent yesterday, before I taped my original take of this podcast, and I was swinging out on one of the wharf swings, and it took me all the way back to 807 Rocket Street in that backyard. I'm serious. Like, it took me all the way back, and I loved it. And I felt so, and my little inner child was filled, and I saw seeing other black folks at leisure at that hour, seeing other millennials at leisure at that hour. You know, the one thing about this pandemic time period, like when we had to adjust our work schedules, our working in an office schedule, I think we should definitely have kept a lot of those things. And when I can, I try to do that. And that gets me to when it's time for me to go to work again. And Nonprofit Quarterly has a whole issue this month on workplace, and I've alluded to it before. I did in my most recent live stream. I'm recording this on May 2nd. It's going to go up literally tonight at midnight. This month's Nonprofit Quarterly might be healing for you. I'm in a collective that meets on Fridays now. If you're a black woman or black person that relates to womanhood in any way, shape, or form, and has been has previously worked in a nonprofit workplace or a philanthropy workplace and needs somewhere to process all of those things that come up working in those workplaces or being put out those workplaces, DM me and I'll get you connected with this group. I don't want to blast open this group, and I want this group to be sacred, because I need processing spaces, and that's one thing that happens with nature that I can get to easily on foot. Houses of faith that don't duplicate the same kind of corporatist mindsets that we have in kind of secular nonprofits. Likewise with our queer support organizations, the groups that started out as being frontline people for HIV/AIDS, which, by the way, still a factor. If you cannot get your medication, it's not working out for you. Kind of like with COVID. If you don't have mitigation, you're on the front lines. And finally, I'm very fortunate to live here, where I can go to, that I have books aren't banned here. We have phenomenal library systems. Of course, we have access to the Library of Congress. I have access to the Library of Congress. I have access to the DC Public Library, and we have a Black feminism exhibit in there right now, or exhibition. I'm in a Smithsonian town. According to the Smithsonian, it's exhibitions. I'm in a place that has all those things, and I get to go and I get to see my elders reflected at the museums, at the libraries, at the books. Of course, Mahogany Books and Loyalty Books. I think it's Loyalty Books Shop and Mahogany Books. Both of y'all are pretty awesome. I use both of them interchangeably, because there's some books that Mahogany carries that Loyalty doesn't, and vice versa. So, and once again, the Young family, as well as like the folks that run Loyalty, y'all are great. And then of course, I can just walk out the door to Politics and Prose, and I walked in there the other day, and a book I had wanted from the Hurston Wright Foundation, I had seen them at a panel up in Baltimore not too long ago on writing and the craft of writing. They were right there. That book was right there in front of me. So just to walk in the bookstores and see myself, and I don't have to worry about that being censored. And of course, Greensboro was like that when I was younger. We had our library system was great. Our school system was better. Like, it was, all these things were factors. And I want us to not be tempted to change it up. And of course, finally, like the art spaces, artists where I've healed, artists where I've thrived. Last night I was at my craft group, and it just felt good to be just kind of normal, because of course the night before I was at a different event, and it is what it is. But in this urbanism space, I know that I'm more radical.
I know that I'm not afraid to speak out even when it's uncomfortable. And y'all know I'm not usually afraid of being broke in order to do it. I got tired a few years ago of having my spirit broken. And that's one thing I want to add. The original list of things I absolutely needed to thrive was just all the, oh, I want to eat food. Like, I want a place, I would love to walk to a restaurant that has like slaw and chili on a hot dog. And, it would be nice to be able to walk into any salon and they could deal, like, they don't look at my hair and try to like fry it up like it's a chicken wing. And I love to be able to do more of my, like, I will crochet and sew anyway, even if I'm doing it in my apartment. But I'm glad that we're doing more meetups nearby, and that I can easily get to meetups if I wanted to, because there's couple people in my meetup on Wednesday nights that take transit. So they usually leave a little earlier, or they take transit over, and then somebody will like give them a lift back to the metro station. So I love that there's that mixture there. But there are absolutely none of this works for me if we don't guarantee housing. I'm just over the fact that the housing market is what it is, and even the rental market. I wouldn't mind even staying in place here, but I need my art room. We need to spread out. And thinking through that is rough. Thinking through, okay, what kind of job, what kind of money am I going to have to raise? I'm thankful for all of y'all who support this podcast financially, but we're just growing this little network here. Is there going to be somebody that sees everything that I'm doing and gets scared of me? And then if I get so much that I really need to go to the hospital, we should have never reopened the hospitals to like disease spread. And even that, like, you never know what's going on with somebody. And then we're living now in a world that's just so full of cameras and surveillance. Even as I was coming down to the car to get ready to record this second round of recording, somebody now has a Ring doorbell in our building. I'm like, okay, we already have a concierge. We already have like locked doors. What are you trying to say? And this is, most of the people on your floor are going to their cars. And I'm looking around this car lot in here, and I'm looking at a bunch of Audis. Like, for real. I don't know if it's because we're right by Audi Field, and maybe some of these people work for Audi Field, but there's a lot of nice, expensive cars in here. We're our little Fit's in here, and I love our little Fit, and it gets us from point A to B, and has done so for 5 years. And when it is paid off, I will do an even bigger happy dance, because then it is an option. It might just become the podcast studio. Who knows? But we need hospitals we need, like, so many hospitals right now. Those of us who are black, especially black women and people who are gender marginalized, we go in those hospitals, and if we don't have anybody to advocate for us, we don't know if we're coming back out. Here in DC, one of our main hospitals that accepts Medicaid, actually two of our main hospitals are way, way away from the side of town that most of the folks who are Medicaid dependent are living on. Now, they're trying to fix that problem by adding a new hospital, adding a new standalone emergency room, but right now, in the nation's capital, some of the same disparities that were in existence like 20, 30 years ago, they're right back now. Yeah, we fixed up a lot of real estate here. Yeah, we have a full working metro system. Yeah, we have tourists have come back. And yeah, downtown's emptied out, but honestly, new downtowns were created because, of course, you come out here where we live, and it's a popular place. In fact, if you see me down here, wave. Don't run up on me. Don't try to touch me. Wave nicely. If I smile back, and if I see you waving, I'll wave back, because I may be masked, because there's a lot of smells and stuff in here. And of course, if I can't, I don't even know if I go to the hospital, it's going to be a good round. So of course I'm going to do above and beyond. So I'm taking a deep breath, because the two things that I talked about here today on today's episode, just the basics. Like, I am over it. I've been working now. I've had a W-2 job or some kind of paid employment now for 19 years. and I started working at a little Dairy Queen when it was between my freshman and sophomore years of college. Then I worked a couple of jobs on campus, and then, you know, you can pull my whole resume. I don't even gonna go down my whole resume. And yet, if somebody told me that they were gonna just say, "Hey, Kristen, we're gonna just guarantee your housing," you know, housing's guaranteed. Now, if you want to add some things, if you want to like upgrade your shower, or if you want to add like shelving, now you pay for that. You know, we'll give you a little IKEA voucher maybe, and then you can go furnish your space, but we're going to make sure you have the 4 walls, and we're going to make sure it's well ventilated, and we're going to, here's the number, all these hospitals are well staffed. Oh yeah, you know, we hired, because we know that you're going to live in this neighborhood, Kristen, and people like you. We found somebody, and we're going to subsidize it. They get to like do your hair. They're here to do your hair. We're going to even like comp your like transit. We configured how we pay for transit. And by the way, there's a task force starting here in the DC metro region that's looking at making metro like the entirety of our transit system, and that's an exciting thing. And so I'm really happy to hear that that's happening, because we need more of those kind of task forces. Not task forces where we're like, oh no, you know, it's mostly these young people and they're scaring us, like I talked about in the first part of the show. But it's like, oh, these hospitals are terrible. We need to make sure our hospitals are better. Oh, you know, it costs us money to evict people. We need to, you know, yeah, we can have luxury apartments, so we need to build more of those. But we need to make sure all the other housing stock is working. Okay, slumlords, you're out of business. We're putting you out. You know, we've been, as I mentioned in an earlier part of the show, punishing the people that actually need punishing, and punishing them in a way where it's not dire, deathly, but it's actually improving what we need to improve. And those things, having those things would make my life feel better, and those are the things that would end gentrification for me, and probably a lot of other people, because it's a known quote that if you end gentrification, it's not if you end gentrification, if you the black feminists quotes from the Combahee River Collective, you know, that idea that if we're free, then everyone is free, because of the multi-marginalizations, and especially those of us who are agender, non-binary, trans, you know, that factor, people who are poor, and being poor is a systemic issue. Poor health outcomes is a systemic issue. All those things, like having many of the things that I mentioned here today would end gentrification for me, and having the little bits of them that I have right now help me defy it as I battle the bigger system. So yeah, you all, this has been the episode. I'm gonna take one more ad break, and then I'll come back and wrap us up.
And so technically this is the 2 book recommendation from my last book recommendation of the show. And yes, they're now both in my bookshop.org store, both Arlen Books. Your First Million, which is the most recent one, as well as It's About Damn Time. It's About Damn Time really focuses on this mindset and how she was able to overcome things, and really kind of a motivational book that you've never thought about business in this way before. And then of course Your First Million is like, you know what, I made $20, you can too. So definitely I'm reading through both of them. Of course Your First Million out this year, and I'm reading through It's About Damn Time again, and you should too. They're in my bookshop.org store. Once again, that's bookshop.org/shop/.
Like, consider how the world that you're in right now could be better. And likewise, if we share identity markers, write that wish list down. Please write that wish list down, and please start out, you know, and slip it to your friends that have that power, because you know we're gonna advocate for ourselves. We do that anyway. You've done enough of it. Let's sit and rest. And everybody else listening to this, think about, for real, if you really want folks to be involved and really want folks to sign on to all these tenets of urbanism, building more housing, having more transit, etc. Let's think about plugging in these holes. And likewise, our youth. Do everything you can to support our youth and help them, and be mindful that their experiences have been different, but we were kids once, and if you're a millennial like me, it was 9/11 and all those kinds of disruptions. So let's be compassionate to each other. And with that, that's the end of our episode. And this, again, Defying Gentrification is a Kristen Jeffers Media publication. That means I'm hosting, I'm producing, I'm researching. I've included in the show notes a lot of great resources this week. And one other resource I forgot to highlight in this taping is the Disability Justice Framework. That's something good to think about as we go into our next episode. And in the next episode, not sure, I think we're going to have some more guests, or I might be back with some more like one-on-one chats. But thanks again for listening. And you can find me, of course, on everywhere podcasts are at. You can subscribe to me on Substack and LinkedIn to make sure you don't miss an opportunity to hear from me. I do my Monday live streams, and I've been so happy to have you on there. Please ask questions on them. I'm open to a little bit of debate within reason. And rate and review on those podcast networks where you can rate and review. Please rate and review those things, those podcast things, the stars, the ratings, everything. And with that, as I always say, do everything you can to defy and eradicate gentrification. I'll see you next time.